Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Business Morning. It's Wednesday, the 22nd of May. I am Bosin Namafaye, and we're glad to have everyone here on the program this morning. We're live to you from Lagos, Nigeria's financial capital. So let's get the show started. A very busy Tuesday. It's been a very busy week so far. Well, let's start from Abuja, Nigeria's political capital, where today the valedictory cabinet meeting will be taking place for all ministers and other government officials, and that will be formally wrapping up the tenure of President Buhari's administration ahead of the May 29 inauguration. The valedictory cabinet meeting, of course, will be the time for the president to give everyone a handshake and say thank you very much for being part of the cabinet, all the ministers, and then we'll find out who makes the next second half of President Buhari's tenure, which is the next 4 years. All that is being eagerly awaited as we look forward to the inauguration program, which will be on May the 29th. But today is a final meeting in that big room with the ministers and, of course, the president sitting at the top of the table. Meantime, you can see a raft of performance figures on the street issued by ministers and heads of agencies. So what are some of what we already have? Some of these ministers are reeling out what they said they've performed over the last 4 years. The junior aviation minister, for example, Hadis Sirika, says a total of 134 projects or aviation projects were concluded 100% between 2015 and 2019 as part of the 157 projects that were initiated and inherited from the Goodluck Jonathan's administration. Meantime, the Honorable Minister in charge of Budget and National Planning, Udoma, says the federal government released a total of 4.33 trillion naira for capital projects in the 3 years of 2016 to 2018. According to the minister, the administration would have done a bit much more, but due to a bit of a budgetary cycle problem. So he says that it will be much easier to track the budget performance if both recurrent and capital budgets run from the same dates. So the Honorable Minister of Budget and National Planning says it's desirable for Nigeria to return to January to December fiscal calendar. And what he just says is what everybody knows. There's been a dislocation over the last few years between the current calendar and the capital expenditure. The current calendar is what you keep spending. We've seen the last 2-3 budgets being signed around May and June. Budget 2019 is not yet signed on yet by Mr. President. It's not likely to happen until after his inauguration on May the 29th. So technically, Budget 2019 will be coming in June as well, which, of course, means that spending, which the current, of course, keep going because the government can spend into the next few months of the following calendar year. So this dislocation between the current and capital expenditure period is what the Honorable Minister Udoma spoke about. Says it's desirable to return to January to December because right now it's very difficult to actually measure what you call budgetary performance when you have the current and capital budgets running at variance on the calendar. And so let's step into the monetary space, where the third Monetary Policy Committee meeting for the year 2019 yesterday finished with 9 out of the 11 members saying the central bank should leave the rate anchors unchanged. But the financial regulator was tasked on a number of areas. First, the central bank was asked to cut commercial banks' appetite for cheap treasury bills and bonds investment. You've seen how commercial banks, at least the big banks, have been reporting billions and billions of naira in returns in just buying government treasury bills and bonds for cheap and pocketing those monies. Now the MPC says the central bank should work very quickly to redirect banks making all that money and redirect those credits or those monies from the banks to the organized private sector. Number two, the regulator was asked to also put a framework in place to ensure that the bad loans in the commercial banks are quickly recovered. Meantime, the central bank chief, Godwin Emefiele, says in his post-communique presentation yesterday afternoon that Nigeria's 2.01% GDP growth in the first quarter of this year, released on Monday, was, quote, suboptimal, vis-a-vis 2.7% average population growth of the country. And he reiterated that the economic recovery is still fragile, quote unquote. Meantime, MTN Nigeria is listed, yes, and still rallying the custom street, 2.8% on the oil share index yesterday. We kicked all the numbers back uphill, thanks to MTN, thanks to a few folks on the market as well, such as Dangote Cement. But the telco giant is not yet out of news headlines regarding its free float, the pricing of the stock, and liquidity. Even as the sector regulator, the Nigeria Communications Commission, NCC, says May 31st is the deadline for MTN Nigeria to pay the balance of 55 billion naira of the 330 billion naira regulatory fine imposed on the telecom company about a year or two ago. All of that is where part of this is what Temple Ajashi is talking about as he takes the conversation from here. Temple Ajashi, our business correspondent from our studios live at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Temple, good morning. A very good day. It was Tuesday in which stocks rallied the strongest we've seen since April, when the market went sluggish, buckling at the knees, and we fell significantly. Now it looks like MTN is lifting the market by the hand. You got your 30,000 back on the composite index, and of course your equity market cap is also much healthier in size. Some folks will be smiling on the top floors of the Nigerian Stock Exchange building on Custom Street where you are. You're on the 9th floor. Oscar and the rest of his team are upstairs. They're the ones who will be smiling much more.
Absolutely, boss. And I think the most part of these, the greatest part of this, which calls for celebration, is the 30,000 psychological line that the market was able to get back yesterday. I mean, if you recall, some folks have actually been selling down, taking profits, sell pressure took over the market, just a few sentiments in terms of bargain hunting was what we saw eventually. And then the markets, you know, started going southwards all the way close to 28,000 psychological mark, but it didn't hit 28,000 eventually. Now we're back up to 30,000 thanks to MTN, as you illustrated earlier. You know, the heavy impact that that company has brought to the market in the short to medium term is really telling positively now on the performance of the market. Again, as part of the sell pressure impact, and of course the profit taking we've seen in recent time, one thing that we notice is that some folks tried to sell down to be able to buy the MTN shares. Now, for the past 3-4 sessions, they have been unable to actually key into all of this, and it looks like they're beginning to take their money back to some stocks with fundamentals. That's why you see the likes of Dangote Cement, which has been low, now coming back up in terms of share price now. Forte Oil, which fell down to as low as 25 naira at some point in time, is beginning to enjoy some positive sentiments now. Ditto for Eternal PLC, and of course a host of other stocks that you have in the market. But generally, look at the year-to-date performance of the markets. That has now moderated just in less than 5 trading sessions, all the way from 10% now down to 3.86%. Look at the month-to-date performance of the market. It's now recording some good returns, growing at some 3.63%. as of yesterday when the markets closed. And yesterday, equity capitalization of the market, look at the numbers, now changed to 13.309 trillion naira, representing an addition of 372.07 billion naira yesterday in the markets, thanks to MTN, one way or the other, even though we know that's kind of has some kind of concerns in the trading community here. But if you look at the buy sentiment yesterday, that was quite weak, because again, the market breadth shows some 16 gainers as against some 20 losers in the markets, led by some livestock, which lost some 10%. But for the sectoral performance, look at the sectors again. Most of them actually recorded some gains. The banking segment of the market was up thanks to Guarantee Trust Bank and a host of other companies there. Only the consumer goods segment of the market was actually down by some 33 basis points. You got the industrial segment of the market pushed up by the positive performance we saw around Dangote Cement, which rose some 3.93% yesterday. Insurance goods segment of the market, WAPIC was a major push in that side of things, and a host of other companies that you have tradable under that segment of the market. Again, you know that the recapitalization thing, which came from NICOM, is a major push in this side of things, even though we haven't seen the reaction that we've been getting from the market is quite negative. For the oil and gas segment of the market, quite a number of movements there. You got a positive movement on Forte oil, back up at 27 naira 80 kobo. That's the support level. O&O is quite negative. 4 naira 65 kobo was what it fell to yesterday. And of course, the Eternal oil rose by some 6.67%, while Japan declined by 4%. If you look at the unlisted securities segment of the market, that was negative, 1.28%. We got the USI down to 749.08, market cap at 538.16 billion naira. And of course, we saw just the total number of transactions put at 17,668, thanks to WAMCO, which did 5 of the trades that we had there and recorded 90% plus of the entire 17,668 units of shares that was traded there. NIPCO PLC also contributed to that. Now let's move on to the fixed income segment of the market, where bonds traded a bit mixed yesterday. We saw slight profits taken, observed at the mids to the long end of the curve, and of course that's due to the fact that some kind of FGM bonds auction will be taking place today. So 100 billion naira worth of transactions expected to take place, or it's been offered by DMO rather. But yields on the short end of the curve actually compressed lower, in tune with what we're seeing at the treasury bill side of things, some kind of depression which has been playing out in that segment of the market. But yields really on the average remains unchanged. Of course, for the treasury bill side of things, slight bullish performance was what we saw. We got yields, coming in lower by some 5 basis points again. Of course, that happened at the mid to the long end of the curve again, because that seems to be where you have the juice in the markets at this time. But rates, we understand, is now beginning to decline, because again, if you compare with what we've been saying in recent time, that's a movement, that pace of change has really reduced, finding the support level now at 11.50%, Bosun.
Tempo, quite a lot to talk about. Again, thank you very much for bringing the insurance subsector performance in there, because it looks like the MPC, in particular the MTN, all those news seem to have trampled over or run over the NICOM story. That June 30 next year is the deadline for the new recapitalization. This was started last year. It was jettisoned, I'm sure you remember. It was set aside. Now the insurance regulator is back again and saying, look, we're setting new guidelines for all the folks within that sector, and the market started moving yesterday. But again, with MTN on the street, worth north of 2 trillion naira, we've got to focus on that. We apologize to the guys in the insurance sector. We'll put that in more context and perspectives as we move on. Thank you very much, Temple Ashaju, our business correspondent. He's checking in for us what today's trading day is looking like towards the end of the show. But first, let's check in with the big story. The United States may be having a very big face-off with China, but is having a very cozy relationship with Nigeria. So for the first time, we had a U.S. trade fair take place in Lagos, and that was yesterday. The Vice President, Professor Yomi Osibajo, was represented by the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Okechukwu Enelama, who spoke about the relationship between Nigeria and the U.S., but more in particular, why this trade fair is important to Nigeria. We'll take a listen to the Honorable Minister, Dr. Enelama.
So on behalf of His Excellency, our Vice President, Professor Yemi Osibajo, previous speakers, as well as the organizers, in welcoming everyone to this first USA Fair, conference and exhibition taking place here in Nigeria. And again, it's just it's a very practical way of demonstrating what we often talk about, which is how do you actually engage and get results. So I just want to applaud the organizers. I want to appreciate the ambassador again and the entire U.S. Embassy team. Again, I'll share another personal story. I had to go in there for something actually personal, and they had invited me to this. And they came to see me there to remind me of this event. I already knew about it, but it shows you the commitment they have to making sure that this event will be a success. And I really applaud that effort. The many sectors that are represented here, including information and communications technology, agriculture and agro-allied, fast-moving consumer goods, oil and gas, education, power, automobile, and so on, represent the areas where Nigeria should be partnering with America, for the greater good. There are also participants from other West African countries, and like the ambassador said, we view Nigeria. I just came from another event where somebody spoke very well of Ghana, and I said what's good for Ghana is good for Nigeria, because frankly, countries do develop together when they're in the same region. I don't buy the rhetoric that Ghana and Nigeria are competitors. I just don't believe that. I believe we're not just neighbors, but if we cooperate with each other, we'll actually build a greater West Africa, a greater Africa, and for the good of our people. So I think I also want to welcome all those participants from all the other countries. Noteworthy is also the quality and number of established Nigerian businesses that are part of this event. I understand a preliminary report shows that there are over 4,000 registrants, and this is preliminary for this event. I applaud the organizers again of this conference and exhibition for putting together such a high impact and event of high relevance. Of course, like the ambassador has pointed out, the relationship between Nigeria and the United States of America is a very strategic one. And of course, the USA remains the largest economy in the world and one that you can't ignore. And Nigeria remains the largest economy in Africa and one you can't ignore. And I think we both have a responsibility to work together for the greater good of not just our two countries, but frankly, the world and certainly Africa. We are committed to nurturing and building this relationship, to its utmost. We want the best for both countries and, like I said, for the wider world. This is the reason we have worked with our partners in the Commerce Department, under the leadership of the previous Commerce Secretary and the current Commerce Secretaries, Benny Priska and Wilbur Ross, to launch the Commercial and Investment Dialogue called the CID. And this is a high-level engagement between our governments and businesses from both Nigeria and the US to eliminate critical hindrances to trade and investment between our countries. All hands are in deck to ensure that we foster the right enabling environment, both for bilateral trade and investment, and also, for achieving the kind of mutual benefit that would be good for our people and the wider community. Let me say that when it comes to this issue of removing hindrances and making it easier, it's something I am very passionate about, and it's something as a government we want to really turn into not just a mantra, but we would like to turn the rhetoric on its head. The way people talk about Nigeria being a difficult place to do business, and they're not necessarily wrong, but we would like to see that reversed. We want this place to become one of the easiest places to do business in the world. And the President Muhammadu Buhari administration has made, that one of its cornerstone priorities. We have something called the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, which is an attempt to bring together all the parts of government across the arms of government, executive, judiciary, National Assembly, as well as the tiers of government, federal, state, councils, and so on, to work together in partnership with the private sector and the other stakeholders in the economy to say, how do we collectively solve the problems we face so that we get the best result? Because that's one area where we all win. I don't think anybody loses. I mean, there might be vested interests that might prefer a difficult economy, but I think, broadly speaking, we all win if we make our economy better. We're also interested in building modern infrastructure. Our president often points out that if you build the infrastructure in Nigeria, the Nigerians will do well. That is the singular most important thing we can do to create jobs. Just build the infrastructure to make it easier to do business in the country. We spent over 3.5 trillion in the last few years, last 3 years or so, but that's not nearly enough. We're trying to figure out how to raise the $140 billion US that Nigeria needs, to catch up on its infrastructure deficit over the next 4 or 5 years. This is something the government is taking a very hard look at and thinking about how do we partner with, great countries like America and the Americans, as well as, other nations and other businesses around the world. We often tell people often ask me at times about China or other sort of emerging powerhouses like that, and we say that Nigeria doesn't have the luxury of dealing with just one country. You know, as great as America is, we want to partner with America, but we also have just of the level of our ambition and the level of our needs. We have to partner with Europe, we have to partner with China, we certainly have to partner with the Middle East and other parts of the world. And therefore, we want to be a good neighbor. We want to be a partner for the world in these very, should I say, challenging times that the world is going through, the world economy and even the world at large. There's an increasing commitment by our government, therefore, to say, how do we reposition the Nigerian economy for high-quality growth and shared prosperity? The other obsession and commitment that this government has, particularly at the very top, the president and the vice president, is this subject of shared prosperity, the kind of prosperity that economists often call inclusive growth or growth. We need it like medicine.
Nigeria's Honorable Minister in charge of Industry, Trade and Investment, Okechukwu Enelama. Let's come back to you after the break. Laura Briefels is leaving Nigeria, but where is she going next? And how's the goodbye looking like from the Market Street? After the break.